This episode is brought to you by Springbrook Autism Behavioral Health. Springbrook provides comprehensive, evidence-based care for children and adolescents with autism and other developmental disabilities. With residential services, educational programming, and clinical support all in one place, Springbrook focuses on helping each individual build skills, increase independence, and reach their full potential. To learn more about their program and how they're supporting families every day, visit their website at springbrookbehavioral.com. Hey guys, and welcome back to All Abilities No Filter. I'm your host, Jake Edgar, and thank you again so much for joining us for our conversation today. Today we're joined by Dr. Russell, an executive functioning and ADHD expert and the founder of Russell Coaching, the largest student coaching practice in the U.S. She works with students and families to build skills in time management, organization, and emotional regulation and independence, helping them navigate the real challenges of school and daily life. Through her connected coaching approach, she focuses on strengthening relationships while building the executive functioning skills students need to succeed on their own. Dr. Russell is also the author of Asking the Right Questions About ADHD, a guide for parents navigating the complexities of ADHD before, during, and after diagnosis. Her work helps families better understand their child's behavior, ask more informed questions, and take meaningful steps with greater confidence and clarity. She's also the host of Breaking Out of the Box, ADHD, Autism, and Anxiety, where she shares practical, real-world strategies for parents raising teens and young adults. Through her podcast, she helps families better understand ADHD, anxiety, and executive functioning challenges, while offering tools that are realistic, actionable, and grounded in everyday life. This was an amazing conversation that I know you guys are going to take home and be able to use these strategies that we speak about today. So just sit back, relax, and enjoy today's conversation. Thanks, guys. All right, Norrine, thank you so much for joining us today. I've been looking forward so much to this conversation. How are you doing today? Not too bad. It's been a good day. Like I said, it's just been nice and easy. And, you kind of always love those types of days. But if you wouldn't mind, for our listeners, just kind of give us a little bit of background about yourself, what you've been working on, or just a little bit kind of what's brought you in for this conversation.
Not at all. I'm Norrine Russell, and I have a coaching practice that is specifically for neurodivergent students. And we work with kids who have some combination of ADHD, autism, anxiety, depression, learning differences. So that's Russell Coaching. Mm-hmm. I'm also the author of a book called Asking the Right Questions About ADHD that I wrote after my experience as the parent of two kids with ADHD. What else can I tell you? I have a background in psychology and education. Actually, I have a PhD in psychology and am really interested right now in how do we help kids with varying different abilities develop their executive functioning skills and their social and emotional skills.
That's awesome. One thing you kind of said that I felt was so interesting and almost doesn't get talked enough is the ADHD aspect of what you do, because for anybody that's listened to our show and everything, we do focus a lot on autism, in that neurodivergent side, and I don't feel like we get to talk enough about the ADHD side, because autism is so talked about. It's been, like I said, it's in media now, it's in pop culture almost, and almost overshadows a diagnosis or just a child with ADHD or that hyperactive issues that they have to deal with each day. If you wouldn't mind, in your own opinion or your professional experience, what exactly is ADHD? Because a lot of parents will think, oh, my kid is hyper, he can't sit still, or he always has to be doing something, he must have ADHD, when there goes so much more into it of how it really can affect the day-to-day life. But in your experience and professional background, what does that look like to you?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a really great place to start. And it's an important place to start because ADHD is defined in the medical and psychological community as very simply a deficiency in the brain's automatic ability to regulate attention. We think attention deficit and that the kid has no ability to be attentive to stuff. Nothing could be further from the truth. ADHD is actually a deficit of automatic regulation of where the attention goes. So parents who are listening are going to go, my kid can pay attention to sports, to games, to TikTok. Right. Your kid definitely can pay attention. It's just that their brain isn't automatically, regularly focusing in on where it needs to be. In addition to that, there is the distraction component. And then there's the impulsivity piece of ADHD, where your kid knows better, but they have trouble doing better. And then most kids have some component of hyperactivity, which again, I think just to broaden people's minds who are listening, we think of kind of that 6-year-old running around a first grade classroom when we think of hyperactivity, or the kid on the playground who's running around yelling and screaming. But hyperactivity can be a lot more nuanced than that. It can also be verbal hyperactivity, the kid who talks chronically and consistently. It can also be sort of an internal feeling of restlessness, and kids who maybe do a lot of body focused picking or a lot of kind of twitching and restlessness in their seat. So we have to think of hyperactivity as broader than the 6-year-old who's, running around the playground with what seems like relentless energy. Just to kind of recap this, it's an inability of the brain to regulate attention. It's definitely a neurodevelopmental disorder. Then you've got the impulsivity and often the hyperactivity.
Wow, it's so interesting hearing, because it is so diversified and so different in a lot of kids. Because we work with the population we work with, we almost always see some type of hyperactive disorder or just something going on with the kid that's underlying the autism. And it's like we almost have to pick that out first, handle that and help with that before we get to the actual being able to actually support the neurodivergent with the autism. What are some signs that parents could be looking for? Because in my own experience, I have been diagnosed with ADD, and it really didn't even make sense to me because I didn't get diagnosed till college with it. And when the doctor I was working with kind of explained it to me, it was just making so much sense from me thinking back all the way in elementary school, where it was like I'd get halfway through what the teacher was saying, and I'm just like, I know I was paying attention, or I think I was paying attention, and I've lost half of it. Or I remember in high school reading books, and I'm on the 5th chapter, and I don't remember anything that's happened, but I know I've read it. And then them actually being able to diagnose this and put me on medication or whatever, but also teaching me different strategies. I think I was a freshman in college. It kind of changed my life a lot, but I always thought to myself, God, if I knew this when I was 8 years old, what could have been? And I wish I was able to recognize signs, or even my parents were able to recognize signs. What are some things when you're working with families that you teach them to look for, or be able to differentiate ADHD from, like you said, just maybe needing a little bit more to be able to focus in situations?
Well, there are a couple of really important responses to that. First of all, we at Russell Coaching really try to align ourselves with the American Academy of Pediatrics guideline around ADHD. And basically, in a nutshell, what the American Academy of Pediatrics says is, if you have a question, if you have a concern, if you think that there's some sign of ADHD, go and get the evaluation. Don't put it off. Don't think, oh, maybe it's just this school or it's just this teacher. Go and get the evaluation. So most of the time when kids come to us, they've had an evaluation. And what's typical in that evaluation process is that parents would be asked to fill out questionnaires, teachers would be asked to fill out questionnaires, there might be some computer testing, and this is vitally important. Whoever is doing the diagnostic process needs to be looking for what else might also be at play. Because, and I think you'll find this interesting, only about 1/3 of kids who have ADHD only have ADHD. 2/3 also have something else, whether that's anxiety, depression, autism, learning differences. And so the question can never be, does my child have ADHD? The question is, what does a complete psychoeducational evaluation tell us about my child? And just to kind of jump off on that for a minute, we know that estimates are at least 50% of kids with autism, and maybe as many as 80 to 90% of kids with autism have ADHD. And so, what's really important for a parent is to understand what's the complete picture. And maybe that feels overwhelming, but please don't let it feel overwhelming. You're going to be able to know better and therefore do better, understanding your child, disciplining your child, parenting your child, and most of all, loving your child when you understand how their brain works. It's very interesting. There is now starting to be a little acronym for kids who have both ADHD and autism, and you've probably seen this, and it's pronounced ADHD, AUDHD. And so, in addition to the increased focus on autism that we're seeing in our, society, we're also seeing an increase in the awareness that many kids have both things going on. And for me, where we really hone in on at Russell Coaching is both diagnoses result in some delays and some deficits in executive functioning skills. And so that's really where we get to come in and make a difference and help kids either with just ADHD or just autism or the combination of develop these important skills of impulse control, planning, time management, organization. That's our piece of the puzzle, if you will.
That's awesome. I think it's so important because even like I said, even in my own life where I still have this going on, it still affects everything I do in my job, everything like that. So being able to learn these strategies, learn ways to kind of almost catch myself when I'm zoning out or not able to, because I never want people to feel like, and I know I've worked with students that are so hyper aware of their ADHD and autism that they're so afraid that they're making people feel like they're unimportant when they're talking because they're zoning out around things that are going on, not able to focus in on a conversation. So those executive skills that you're talking about are just so important. One thing, I actually spoke with a couple of parents about this last week when we were working on an IEP for their student who has been dealing with ADHD, I think they're going on their 5th year now, where it's been actually recognized in their IEP. And you probably have this experience too. Their child is extremely gifted and very capable. And one of their biggest frustrations was before they were able to get it involved in the IEP and get the services, and what they needed was they knew how smart their child was just by conversations and very, very good with STEM work and just being able to pick up on things very quickly. But their grades never reflected that, and reports from teachers never reflected that. And something they still struggle today is finding things to motivate their child. What are some maybe advice you give to parents who are really suffering or really having a hard time finding that motivation for a kid that falls under the ADHD or whatever diagnosis? Because I see parents and we sit there and we'll talk about things before an IEP where we're trying to list things that they could implement in school because the motivation's not there. They can't quite connect the dots where this kid's skill set is being reflected on a report card. And I think that really does beat parents down sometimes. And with your coaching, what are some things you tell parents when that's the situation?
Yeah. So this is so common in ADHD. And the first thing I want to say to parents is this is not, anything about your parenting. It's nothing about your child's personality or their values or how disciplined they are. What happens in the ADHD brain is that the motivation center and the reward center are not very well connected. So what you're describing is entirely consistent with an ADHD diagnosis. Many times we'll say kids know better, but they can't do better yet, right? The all important yet. And so what we really need to understand is that when we say motivation, it sounds like a character flaw, kind of, right? Like that kid's not motivated, or if they would try harder. And what's really more helpful is to think about what are the specific executive functioning skills that that child needs coaching for in the moment in order to get. So many kids have trouble processing information. Many kids have trouble breaking down the information, right? Many kids have trouble just paying attention to the information, especially if there's not a comprehensive ADHD treatment plan in place. Many kids have trouble getting started, just starting the task. Kids have trouble with flexibility, moving from the previous task to this task. What we know about ADHD is it responds to consequences in the moment, right? It's not something distant. It's not the check mark at the end of the day, right? It's not the reward on Friday. It's not, the big cash prize at the end of the semester. Those consequences need to be immediate and clear. And so when a teacher or a teacher's aide or any other educational professional sees that kid struggling, helping them to start the task through coaching and then praise, right? Doing a great job getting started. You're doing a great job. You've got 1 or 2 math problems done already. You are going to get, whatever it might be, a check mark on your behavior chart, which is a word I can't stand when it comes to ADHD. Not behavior, it's symptoms, right? But immediate feedback in the moment is what most kids and teenagers with ADHD need and respond to. And that feedback might be you're on the right track or you're actually not on the right track, but it needs to happen in the moment, which is why these, behavioral report cards at the end of the day don't really work because the student is not getting feedback in the moment, but they're also not getting coaching in the executive functioning skill that's underlying what we're calling motivation.
Right. I think that's so interesting when you talk about the behavioral parts of it and everything, because when I'm working with students that have the diagnosis and I can tell are getting, it's hard to see them when you can tell they're trying their hardest to pay attention. And the last thing I want to do is come at them like I'm getting on to them about something that I can tell they're trying to control. So it's hard for me as an educator to balance that. I want to be super supportive, but I also want to help them and move forward. And I know you talk about having connection before you correction. And I think that's so cool. If you could speak a little bit more on that too, because I know when I speak with a lot of other teachers, not even just ADHD, almost everything, when you see the child trying their best, but the diagnosis is almost wrapped around them, pulling them back. And the last thing you want to do is shame them for something that's just the way they're wired. Because you don't want them to feel like they're just never going to make progress. So I love that connection before correction. So what is that exactly that when you coach that?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that because it's so important. So on the CHADD website, which is Children and Adults with ADHD, CHADD, there is a study that suggests that kids with ADHD get 20,000 more negative pieces of feedback before age 10. So listeners who are ADHD professionals are going to be familiar with that stat. Parents might not be, though. And of course, it makes sense, right? It makes logical sense. You take this impulsive, hyperactive kid and they're getting a lot of correction. What we, and I think most parenting advocates and ADHD experts really believe and have tried to help everyone put into practice is this idea of connection before correction, which just means how do we relate to this child? In Russell coaching specifically, it means what are the child's strengths and how can we capitalize on those strengths in order to get their work done? So if we have a child for whom we know they love relationships, right? We might say, Your teacher is going to be really happy if you're able to get this math sheet turned in on time, right? And that's connecting with who the child is and what their strengths are. If we have a child who really values being seen as a leader with their peers, we might say, you know what, you have an opportunity here to shine. Let's really work on getting this essay outline done during the 15 minutes you have in class today, right? Or if you have a child who has a particular deep interest in something, trains, transportation, animals, whatever it might be, hey, let's use your interest in this to get this work done. And so basically it's inserting a pause, which is a skill we're always trying to teach kids with ADHD, right? Pause before you act, right? It's us as professionals and as parents inserting a pause before the correction to connect. Hey, are you having a hard day today? Or acknowledging their strengths in the way that we do, or saying, what kind of help would be useful to you here? But it's always connecting with the child, the student, the teenager in a way that acknowledges that they are doing that this is genuinely hard, and that you see and you recognize their efforts. Because so many times for so many years, kids with ADHD just got the message, you were a behavior problem. Nothing could be further from the truth. This is not behavior. These are symptoms.
Absolutely. It's almost like you have to affirm everything with them before. It really almost like you got to check yourself a little bit and make sure that you're respecting the diagnosis before really correcting, if that's what we want to call it, anything. Because I almost feel like anybody would like that, whether you have ADHD, autism, or anything, where if someone's approaching any type of criticism or trying to deliver it, they're coming from it from we want to just get you from point A to point B as successfully as possible, but we understand these roadblocks that you have to go through that some people don't. And that feeling of understanding between the two people, it just makes it so much easier and so much more supportive. So I think that's really awesome. When we're thinking about environmental issues, that's something I've gone to different schools to help them set up their transitional classrooms, their self-contained classrooms. And it's so amazing the different opinions that I'll have when I'm going in to work with principals or things, because some principals want it to look as vibrant and so as colorful as possible. But then I will say that probably the majority of teachers or principals or admins that I work with, they're like, we have to have neutral colors, nothing going on the walls, as little distraction as possible, to where it almost looks like a hospital room. And I know schools and parents too, I've seen kids' bedrooms with that same problem. And there's always such a hard middle ground to find to where it's not distracting, but you don't feel like you're in a mental hospital or a padded room at the same time. Because I've worked with kids that just thrive in an environment of constant stimulus because it just keeps their brains going, and then some that needs the opposite end. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, the idea that we are going to grab the attention of kids with ADHD through vibrant colors is just off base, right? We are not going to get them to read 10 points on a science poster through using bright red and bright blue. So let's get realistic about what that classroom environment can look like so that it's genuinely helpful, not just for your kids who have 504 IEP plans, but for all your kids. And to me, that is really figuring out what are the 4 to 6 things that could be on the wall that will help all of the children in that classroom every day. And I'm also a fan of, let's organize this on the walls in such a way that it makes sense, right? What you see when you go into so many elementary school classrooms is every foot of the wall space is taken up with, what are our objectives in science? What are our objectives in language arts? What's the schedule for the day? What's the schedule for the month? What are upcoming events? I think, would do so much better if we would make one wall the science wall, one wall, the language arts wall, one wall the organizing your day wall, right? Let's use our skills in metacognition and organizing to help our kids learn these skills. This is where I look for math stuff. This is where I look for language arts. This is where I look for the day, instead of stuff all over the walls, because at some point during the year, you're going to need it. And that's asking a lot of teachers. I get that. But I am a firm believer in figure out what are the 4 to 6 things that every child in your classroom will benefit from being able to see every day. After that, this is where technology can be helpful. Put stuff up on your whiteboard, put stuff on your smart board. Not everything has to be up for the entire year from September 1 through July 1.
Right. And I think I tell teachers this too, is in my opinion, consistency is better than being just the most creative, vibrant classroom in the world, because I taught with one teacher last year, and to be fair, she was a brand new teacher, so she was learning, but she just felt like every day, the kids would be into something new, so she would change it up. And almost every week they were almost in a new classroom, and they would have kids that were just struggling with transitions, struggling with that. And I told her, I was like, well, because they have no idea what they're supposed to be doing, because you're changing it constantly. And that lack of consistency, almost lack of predictability, can cause a lot of stress with kids. It causes a lot of stress with me. I like things consistent. I like things the same. And I told her, just pick what you want, keep it consistent. And like you almost said, keep almost the area is the same, but then the theme or whatever in that area can change a little bit. I told her, if you won't change, you can change the books that are in your library in the corner, things like that. And it's taken her a little while, but I think she's going through those first year teacher hurdles that I went through. And I think a lot of our listeners can relate to too, because it can be intimidating for first year teachers to really have to adjust and accommodate to, like I said, the autism, the ADHD, the ADD, the oppositional defiance, which I think can come from a lot of ADHD backgrounds and things too. And it is a lot for first year teachers to go through. If you were working with a first year teacher that was having to adapt to ADHD children in their classroom, because I was that first year teacher too, feeling so overwhelmed, because I feel like it really makes you doubt your classroom management skills when all that's going on. So do you have advice or even coaching for teachers on how to manage their classrooms when you're dealing with so many big personalities and so many needs when it comes to their population in their classroom?
It's tough, right? It's a challenge. And we absolutely need to prioritize supporting teachers. This is tough, right? And as school choice becomes more prevalent across the country, some public schools are being left with a lot of kids, a greater proportion of kids who have 504s or IEPs. So I want to do nothing but support teachers and administrators. And if you want support, book a call with me and I will listen to you for 30 minutes. It's that important to me. That being said, I think there are a couple of things for teachers that are really helpful to keep in mind. First, create your space by your desk. What do you need to be at your best during the day? We like to think it's your classroom, but it's the student's classroom, right? Create your space at your desk. Figure out, what do you need in order to make it through the day? These days are rough. They're hard. Make your space, your calming space, your sensory space, your excited, get motivated space, whatever you need. Second, I would say, do not, under any circumstances, take kids' behavior personally. It can feel so personal, right? Feel like they hate you, they disrespect you, you're the worst teacher. That is not what's going on. It is not personal. It is not personal to you as the teacher. And you know what? It's also not personal to that child. A child who has been diagnosed with ADHD is de facto impulsive. They are going to do things that they know better, that they don't need. And so we've really got to provide support for teachers, administrators, paraprofessionals when they feel run down, right? We've got to normalize asking for support. Hey, can I just vent with you about the student who really pushed my buttons today? We don't need to do anything about it. Teachers are smart. They're wise. They need to be heard, right? That's really my third point is school culture needs to support being heard about what's difficult or what's hard for teachers, right? And so create your own safe space, do everything possible every single day to not take this personal. And third, administrators and PTA and everyone create a school culture where it's safe to talk about what are the frustrations, because there is no denying that kids with ADHD can be some of, if not the most frustrating kids in your classroom. And I have 2 children of my own who were ADHD, and we see over 100 kids a week who have ADHD. There's no denying the reality that having a kid who cannot pay attention, who is impulsive and hyperactive, is disruptive in the classroom.
Absolutely. What are your, as a parent, kind of want to get your opinion on this too, because I'm not a medical doctor or anything like that, but and when I speak to parents and they ask me these, it makes me nervous to answer because it's not my background. But with medication, with Adderall, Vyvanse, Ritalin, everything under the sun, as a parent with children with ADHD, what are your thoughts on that? Because I've been on Adderall, and I think it's helped me tremendously. But I went through a lot of being well overprescribed things like Vyvanse to where it really messed with my system, messed with my day-to-day, almost my mental state, and it took a couple of doctors to figure out the exact dose. And I'll be honest, it sucked to go through. I did not enjoy it. I couldn't imagine a parent going through it with a younger child. Like I said, I was in my 20s and I did not like it. What are your thoughts with medication, just as a parent's point of view, or when you're coaching? Because I know that can be a sensitive thing with parents because I know I didn't want to be completely dependent on it, where I feel like I couldn't function without it. I didn't want to feel if I didn't have it, I couldn't succeed or couldn't do well in my job. And I know that's kind of a fine line to balance. And I couldn't imagine as the parent making the decisions.
Yeah. You know, I'll tell you, and I want to make sure I get this entire thought across. As a parent, my kids' lives are better because of ADHD medication. You can see it on a daily basis. They are more functional. They are happier. They are getting more positive feedback from their environment. They are more productive. That's my parent experience, okay? Have we struggled to find the right dose and the right duration and the right medication? Absolutely. It is very rare that the first medication dose and type is right. This is where you really have to recommit as a parent to working with whoever's doing the prescribing. And I've been through it. Mine are 16 and 18. We've been on lots of different ADHD medication. It's not been easy to find out. The other piece of this that I want to say ever so clearly is I'm also not a medical professional and I don't give medical advice. What I say all the time at the practice and when I'm on podcasts is we at Russell Coaching align with what are the best practices in medicine, in psychiatry, in pediatrics around ADHD. I don't have an opinion about ADHD. I read the science and I'll help parents break down the science. I don't have an opinion about whether or not you should put your kid on meds. I can refer you to what the research says, which is really clear that medication is first-line treatment, that kids who are on medication have better outcomes than kids who aren't on medication. Recent research by the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry shows that the earlier medication is started, the better the long-term outcome. That's not my opinion, though. That's not my opinion about what you should do with your kid or whether medication works. That's what the science says. What is my opinion is you should go and have lots of conversations. Your doctor, with your nurse practitioner, with the psychiatrist about how is your child doing What level of symptoms are they experiencing? And what is an effective treatment plan? And so I know that was a really long answer, but I don't want to be misunderstood by your audience.
Absolutely.
I don't medical advice and I don't have opinions as a professional. I will help you understand what the research, and I will tell you, and I say this over and over again in my book, go and have a conversation over and over and over again with your doctor. ADHD is a chronic disorder that most people have for a lifetime, at least half of people. And so it has to be treated in a chronic way. And then you can see your child with ADHD grow and flourish and tap into their strengths. I mean, I'll just tell you quickly, I know we're at the end of our time, but my son is my older child and my more complex child. He just turned 18. And this is a kid who couldn't tolerate sitting in school, in a classroom. And he started working about 2.5 years ago. And I thought, how's this kid going to make it through the workday? 2 years later, he has been working at Gregory Vet. Shout out to Gregory Vet in Tampa, Florida. 2 years. He has been asked to come be a camp counselor at the camp that he's attended for several years. And he is somehow overcoming all of the things, the ADHD, the autism, the anxiety, and the depression. But it has taken a superhuman effort on everyone's part, all of his team. And that, I think, is what I want to say today, is the team approach is so vital. We're part of that team. We'll take the lead happily at Russell Coaching. We'll reach out to schools, to the psychiatrists, to whoever. But that team approach is vital. And that is what we believe at Russell Coaching.
Oh, without a doubt. I tell parents all the time, it's just flood yourself with information, flood yourself with support. I'm not an expert on many things, as I tell them, but I can point you in the direction of someone that is. And that being said, where can our listeners find the Russell Coaching, find your book, find all these other amazing resources that you're working to provide?
Yeah, I would love for them to find us. We're at russellcoaching.com. You can go into Google or any AI and type Norrine Russell or Russell Coaching. You'll find us easily. And I want to say on our website, we have a blog that maps out all of the executive functioning skills one by one and how parents can help those skills develop. I also have a podcast, which you can find on Apple or Spotify, ADHD, Autism, and Anxiety, Breaking Out of the Box. And of course, you can find my book on, any bookseller and on Amazon, Asking the Right Questions. But if you go to russellcoaching.com, you'll find all of those things easily there. And you can book a call to talk with me for, as long as 30 minutes for free.
That's awesome. And listeners, all of these amazing resources and Norrine's websites all linked on our website as well. If you go find the episode on our website, all these amazing resources are there just a click away. Always go find all these amazing things our guests talk about, especially what Norrine's talking about today. It's just sounds amazing. I know I'm going to go check it out. But listeners, thank you guys so much for joining us today. Norrine, thank you so much for being with us. It's been an amazing conversation. Guests, please like, comment, leave us questions. I say this at the end of every episode. Your questions are how we build our episodes. So leave as many as you can for us. And we'll try to just connect and address everything that's left. But until then, guys, thank you so much. And we can't wait for our next unfiltered conversation. Thanks, guys.